Hey folks, this is Riker with another Diablo lore video. In today's episode, we discuss the fall of King Leoric, one of the most tragic characters in all of Diablo's lore. This is part 12 of a video series in which we explore the major players in the story of Diablo, from the Nephalem to Tyrael to Deckard Cain to Diablo himself, and give a crash course on what exactly is going on story-wise in this game series. Feel free to check out our previous episodes if you haven't, and be sure to have subscription notifications turned on so you can catch when a new episode comes out in hopefully less than another year. In our last episode, we discussed the corruption of the Soul Stones and how the three primevals had planned to be captured all along. Well, as we left off, Mephisto and Diablo had spread their corruption and freed themselves of their soul stones after about 2 centuries of imprisonment, and Diablo was seeking to possess a host, specifically King Leoric. In order to regain his power, Diablo needed an anchor in the mortal world, and so he began to whittle away at Leoric, twisting his thoughts and emotions until the man would become weakened enough to fully possess. Now, for months, Leoric tried to fight off Diablo. He sensed that some evil was trying to possess him, but he kept this a secret. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence in those who follow you when you reveal that a voice in your head is telling you to do bad things. Now, Leoric thought that his virtue and faith would be enough to fight off the evil presence, and maybe that would have been true if that evil presence were not a lord of hell. Like, the save DC on that will saving throw is just way too high. So, over time, Diablo burned all honor and virtue out of Leoric's soul. The constant fight against the corruption was driving Leoric insane, and he became increasingly paranoid and deranged, and began to order the execution of anyone who questioned him. He would beat people with his scepter. He started hunting peasants in the hunting grounds around his manor. It got to the point where his subjects began to call him the Black King. Well, Leoric got wind of this and didn't appreciate the nickname. In his paranoia fearing regicide, Leoric ordered Chancellor Amon to secure his manor by sealing the caves to the east and filling them with giant spiders that Lazarus had obtained. Spiders. Why does it always have to be spiders? Now, the reasoning here was that the caves to the east are too close to Leoric's land and could serve as an entry point for would-be purveyors of regicide? Now, let's talk a bit about Chancellor Amon. You might recognize the name Amon. He's the grandfather of Hadrig Amon, the blacksmith in Diablo 3. He originally lived in Chaldeum in a manor with his family before Leoric took his forces and journeyed to Conduras. Amon and his family included, so Amon and little Hadrig moved to Tristram. Now, when Leoric gave Chancellor Amon the order, Amon tried to get the king to change his mind because he believed those caverns specifically were ancient ruins once inhabited by the Ancients, to be redundant, or Nephalem as we know them now. They just weren't familiar with the word back then. But he was ultimately forced to order the royal guard to obey the king's command and desecrate the ruins within the caverns with the evil monster spiders. Now, these monster spiders had been obtained by Lazarus and worked on for weeks to monsterify them even more. The biggest spider became known as Queen Aranea, the Spider Queen. And these caverns became known as the Caverns of Aranea, as visited in Diablo 3. Now, Lazarus, still under Diablo's influence, did his best to keep Leoric's worsening state secret throughout all of this. As Leoric's most trusted advisor and as an archbishop of the Zakarum Church, a church that had been secretly taken over by Mephisto, Lazarus had the position and authority to help cover up the fact that the king was going cuckoo bananas. But there's only so much you can cover up before people start asking questions. You know, questions like, why are you hunting peasants like wild game? Or, can I see if your character sheet still says lawful good? Now, one such person asking these questions was Lacdanon, a knight who once served the Zakarum Church with great distinction and was now captain of Leoric's Order of the Light. Lacdannen watched Leoric's descent into madness, and every time he tried to raise a question or objection, he'd be scolded by Lazarus for questioning his king. The situation peaked when Leoric began ordering the Order of the Light to venture to neighboring villages and basically bully villagers into submission. Stop calling him the Black King. He doesn't like it. Stop it. We'll mildly execute your family. So when Lacdannen questioned Leoric's motives here, Lazarus outright charged Lacdannen with treason. But the priests and knights of the Order of Light basically laughed off the charge, knowing Lacdannen was an honorable and just man. Remember, he was their leader, and Lazarus was just some guy. So instead of having the intended effect, this ended up casting further suspicion on Lazarus and Leoric. It's kind of like the Streisand effect. Lazarus wanted everyone to ignore the king's crazy behavior, but ended up drawing more attention to it instead. Now at this point, the jig was up. Too many questions were being asked, and it was only a matter of time before the Order of the Light would turn on Leoric. So Lazarus had to act fast. He needed a distraction, and a big one. Lazarus convinced Leoric that the Kingdom of Westmarch, an ally, was planning an invasion, and manipulated Leoric into declaring war first. This way, any knights that were not 100% loyal to Leoric could be sent away to war, and to death, since Westmarch had superior forces. And Leoric's priests would be sent away as diplomatic emissaries. Now those closest to Leoric tried to convince him that the war was unjustified and unwinnable, but Lazarus convinced Leoric otherwise. Lacdannen, still honor-bound to follow his king's command, thus begrudgingly led the royal army of Kandurus and the Order of Light to war against Westmarch. And that's how Lazarus, with one play, managed to get rid of all the meddling do-gooders that were thwarting Diablo's plans. Well, all but one. Queen Acilla. Yes, the wife of King Leoric and mother of his two sons. Leoric loved Acilla deeply. And surely a wife would notice her once noble husband descending into madness. So Lazarus convinced Leoric that Acilla was conspiring against him. So Leoric imprisoned her in his dungeons and ultimately had her executed. And Lazarus was the one to drop the blade on her, even as she insisted to Leoric that she had never betrayed him.
My lord, the prisoner is ready, as you requested.
Thank you, Lazarus. Your loyalty is invaluable in the midst of all these traitors. And you, my dear, my own wife and queen, conspiring against our kingdom.
My love, I swear, I have never betrayed you.
Lies. Until the very end.
Following her beheading, Acilla's remains did not decay, which apparently was proof that she was a pure soul wrongly executed. Does that mean all the other executions were rightful, since they all decayed? She was buried in Ashwold Cemetery, a place we visit in Diablo Immortal, and the location of her tomb was kept secret so that no one would disturb her. Only her handmaiden knew its location. I'm sure that's never going to come up again, but her soul was bound to the site of her execution, unable to move on, and that's where we find her in Diablo 3. Now, Diablo, with all his obstacles eliminated, tried his best to take full possession of Leoric, but the man's will was simply too powerful. Some part of Leoric's soul still resisted the Lord of Terror. Frustrated, Diablo gave up on that plan, relinquishing his control over Leoric, and started to search for a new host. Thankfully, or not, he didn't have to look very far because, as it turns out, like father, like son. The young Prince Albrecht, son of Leoric, seemed perfect for Diablo. So Diablo ordered Lazarus to kidnap Albrecht and bring him down into the deepest depths of Tristram Cathedral. There, Diablo filled the child with terror and easily took full possession of him. A shard of Diablo's soulstone was driven into Albrecht's forehead, and the prince's body twisted and morphed into an approximation of Diablo's true form. The prince's nightmares fueled Diablo. He peered into the kid's subconscious mind and manifested his greatest fears, summoning monsters into the world. The borders between the mortal realm began to warp and tear, and the burning hells began to seep into the world and take root in the depths of Tristram Cathedral, which explains why, when you play Diablo 1, as you proceed deeper and deeper into the dungeon, the landscape becomes increasingly hellish. Now, Leoric was not part of this plan. All Leoric knew was that his son went missing. And while Diablo was no longer influencing him by that point, the extended battle with the Lord of Terror had left Leoric almost completely insane, and the disappearance and seeming kidnapping of his son is what drove Leoric over the edge. He flew into a rage and began torturing and executing people en masse, effectively purging Tristram of most of its denizens by either outright killing them or driving them away. At this point, the war with Westmarch was decidedly lost, and Lacdannen returned to Tristram with what few men had survived. As if the war itself wasn't bad enough, the knight returned to find Tristram in chaos, under a clearly mad and tyrannical king. Lacdannen and the remains of the Order of the Light went to confront Leoric, who instantly accused them of being part of the conspiracy and sent his guards to kill them. Lacdannen and his men managed to defeat the guards and cornered Leoric, begging him to explain his actions, but Leoric only cursed and spat at them, calling them traitors, and Lacdannen was forced to accept that Leoric was beyond salvation. With great sorrow, he ran his blade through his king's heart, and with his dying breath, Leoric cursed his former knights.
Keep your distance from him. This burden is mine to bear. May death bring peace from your madness, Leoric.
Traitors! Even in death, the armies of Condorus will still obey their king, even if you will not.
Despite everything and out of love and respect for the man that Leoric once was, Lacdannen ensured that Leoric received a proper burial in the royal crypts beneath the cathedral. But Diablo wasn't done completely ruining Leoric's life yet. He had taken everything from the man. His people, his love, his youngest son, even his life. But now he also took his afterlife away from him. Diablo called Leoric back from the dead, and to the horror of Lacdannen and the other knights, Leoric rose from his grave as the Skeleton King. Now, Leoric's dying curse took effect. The knights were overcome by dark powers and had all honor and virtue stripped away from them, becoming Hell Knights in service of the Skeleton King. Only Lacdannen managed to resist, but fearing that he too would succumb to the corruption, he ventured down into the catacombs to die alone rather than risk putting Tristram in danger. But what would happen to the town of Tristram now that Diablo has taken a host? Whatever happened to Leoric's second son, who we conveniently have not spoken about yet? Will Lazarus ever get his comeuppance? All these questions and more will be answered as we continue to explore this Diablo lore video series. Stay tuned. Until then, be sure to get caught up on past episodes. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. We've got a bunch of Patreon rewards like behind-the-scenes stuff, monthly hangouts, Q&A, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more Diablo content.